Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be learning about the selection sort in Java. But before we do that, we need to understand what sorting exactly means. Sorting is basically when you arrange the elements of your array in an ascending or a descending order. So in this case, I made an array which has 5 elements: 22, 9, 8, 1 and 3. I could arrange them in an ascending order: 1, 3, 8, 9 and 22, or I could arrange them in a descending order: 22, 9, 8, 3 and 1. Both of them are examples of sorting, and sorting is really helpful. Now, your initial thought might be, well, since you know the elements, you can just sort them in whatever order you want. But in cases when you have a larger number of elements, this is really hard, especially when you don't even know what these elements are. What we do instead is we use something like a sorting algorithm. The bubble sort, the selection sort, the insertion sort, all of them are examples of sorting algorithms which can arrange the elements of an array, often using a for loop. In this case, we're going to be learning about the selection sort. And the selection sort is really simple. If you learned about the bubble sort, this is even easier. So first, we'll try to get some intuition behind how this would work. What we're going to do in the selection sort is we're going to take each element of the array. First, we're going to take the first element of the array at index 0. This is 22. We're going to find the lowest value in the rest of the array. So in the yellow part of the array, we're going to find the lowest value. In this case, it's 1. Once we find it, we're going to swap these two values. Now, you could already understand that as we keep doing this for every element in the correct order, you could arrange them in a proper order, in an ascending or a descending order. In this case, since I'm pushing the lower elements to the beginning of the array, I'm sorting it in an ascending order. So now, once we've sorted the first element of the array, we're going to take the second element. We're going to find the lowest value in the rest of the array, which is 3. Since 3 is lesser than 9, we're going to swap them, and we're going to basically sort the first two elements. Right. Now, we're going to take the third element of the array, which is 8. 9 is the lowest value in the rest of the array, but 9 is not lesser than 8. If I did swap 9 and 8, you can already understand that I won't get a correct ascending order. So what we're going to do is we're not going to swap them. Next, we're going to take the fourth element of the array, which is 22. The lowest value in the rest of the array is obviously 9. So since 9 is lesser than 22, we're going to swap them. And we're going to get something that looks like this. And you can see that once I'm done with this, I easily sorted all the elements of my array. Now this was a lot more abstract. How do we actually do this in a program using a for loop? So I have this array over here which has 5 elements: 22, 9, 8, 1 and 3. I have two iterators, I and j, and I have a variable called min, which basically stores the index of the lowest value in your array. Min is initially set to I because we don't know what's the lowest value. We're going to use the iterator j and the variable min to find that lowest value. If you watched the video on how to find the minimum value in an array, this should make sense. I really recommend you watch that first. Now here you can see that I have a condition and I have an update. All we're doing is checking if a of j is lesser than a of min. If this is true, we're going to set min to j. This might sound confusing, but it's pretty simple. If this is my minimum value, and if I find something lower than that, we're going to set this as our new minimum value. Basically, if the element at the index j is lesser than our known minimum, we're going to make that element the new minimum. That's what we learned. And that's something that we already know. So here, we'll start off with I set to 0. But j is going to be initialized to I plus 1. Because we want to find the lowest value in the rest of the array. Basically, we want to find the lowest value in all elements after I. This might not make that much sense now, but as we iterate this array, you'll understand why j is always set to I plus 1. Now let's start iterating this array. So if you look at this array over here, j is initially set to 1. And we're going to check if a of 1, basically if a of j is lesser than a of min. In this case, this is true. 9 is lesser than 22. So we're going to set min to j. Our min is going to be set to 1. Remember, what we're doing is that if this is our minimum value, if we find something lower than that, we're just setting this as our new minimum value. Our j is now going to increment to 2. And we're going to check again if a of 2, basically 8, is lesser than a of min, 9. Since this is again true, we're going to set min to 2. Our j is going to increment again to 3. We're going to check if a of 3 is lesser than a of min. This is again true, so our min is going to be set to j. Min is going to become 3. Our j will increment again to 4. And now we're going to check if a of 4 is lesser than a of min. This is false, so we don't set min to j. Now at this point, we've completed the first iteration of the array. And by now, our min is set to 3. Basically, the lowest element is at the index 3. This is exactly what we saw in the beginning. Once we find the lowest value in the rest of the array, we're just going to swap it with the initial value. Basically, the value at a of I. Now to do this swapping action, we're going to use a different variable. And we're going to call it temp. Initially, temp is set to 0. Over here, what we're going to do is we're going to copy the value at a of I, that is we're going to copy 22 into our temp variable. We're going to set a of I to a of min. Basically, we're going to copy 1 to a of I. And then we're going to copy the value in our temp variable to a of min. So this would become 22. And you can see that by doing this, we basically swapped the two values. To understand this better, I definitely do recommend watching the video on the bubble sort. Even if you didn't, by the end of this video, you will understand how this works. So by now, we've sorted the first element of the array. Just like before, we found out what's the lowest value and we've swapped it with the initial value. Next, we're going to take the next value of the array. So our I is going to increment to 1. I told you the j is always initialized as I plus 1 because we want to find the lowest value in all the elements after I. So j is going to be set to 2. Min is initially set to I because we don't know what's the lowest element. So now let's just start iterating this array. Our j is going to be set to 2. And we're going to check if a of 2 is lesser than a of min. Since 8 is lesser than 9, we're going to set min to 2. So our min would become 2. Our j is going to increment to 3. And now we're checking if a of 3 is lesser than a of min. 22 is not lesser than 8. So our min is going to stay as it is. We're going to increment j again to 4. And a of 4 is lesser than a of min. The condition is true. So we're going to change min to 4. And you can see that once I'm done with this iteration, I found the lowest value in my array. And now we repeat the same process. We swap the lowest value with the initial value that I'm taking. Basically, we swap a of I and a of min. And to do this, we're again going to use our temp variable. So our temp variable is initially set to a of I, which is 9. We're going to copy the value in our a of min into our a of I. And we're going to copy the value in our temp variable to a of min. Once I'm done with this, I've swapped these two values. And I've sorted the first two elements of the array. Right, since we've done with this whole iteration, our I is going to increment to 2. Remember, j is always going to be set to I plus 1. So j is going to be set to 3. And as usual, min is always initially set to I. Let's just start the iteration. We're going to first check if a of j, which is a of 3, is lesser than a of min. Basically, if 22 is lesser than 8. This is false. So our min will stay as 2. Our j will increment to 4. And now we're going to check if a of 4 is lesser than a of min. This is also false. So we're not going to change the value of min. And we're done with this iteration as well. Since our j is set to the value after I, every time we iterate it, it gets a little shorter. Now, following your logic, you should know that we basically swap the value in a of I with a of min. It's true that a of min is the same as a of I, We know that, but the program doesn't. So what it does is that it does swap it. It swaps the value with itself. Basically, it copies the value in a of I into a temp variable. It then copies the value in our temp variable to a of min. And we really don't need to think about this too much because it's not doing anything. It's just swapping the value with itself. So now our I is finally going to increment to 3. We're going to set j to I plus 1, basically 4. Our min is also going to be set to I. And now we're only going to check one thing. If a of 4 is lesser than a of min. This is true. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the value of min to 4. So now we're just going to swap a of I and a of min. We're going to copy the value in a of I into our temp variable. So our temp is going to be set to 22. We're going to set a of I to a of min. And then we're going to copy the value in our temp variable to a of min. And once I'm done with this, I've sorted the last two elements of my array. And you can see that I'm done with the iteration. I've completely sorted all the elements in my array. Now, I know it seems confusing, but it's literally the same thing that we did before. The iterator I is used to take any element of the array. In this case, we're taking 22. Min and j are used to find the lowest value in our array. So in this case, 1. And using a temp variable, we're just going to swap these two elements. It's that simple. Now, we'll actually implement a selection sort in Java using a real program. So I've written 4 steps over here to easily write a program. If you look at the steps, the first step is to basically take each element of the array. In other words, just iterate the array. The next step is to find the lowest value in all the elements after it. Previously, we did this using j as an iterator. Then we just swap the lowest value with the original element. And we repeat this process multiple times. So if you haven't realized it already, since we're using 2 different iterators, we actually use a nested for loop for this. The inner loop to continue this process and the outer loop to repeat that process multiple times. And now let's just write this program. First, I'm going to create my outer loop. For int I is equal to 0, I is lesser than 5 because 5 is the length of the array, and then I plus plus. Inside my outer loop, I'm going to create my inner loop. Now my inner loop uses j as the iterator. So we're going to set j to I plus 1. And we know why this is. Because I want to find the lowest value in all the elements after I. That's why we say that j is going to be equal to I plus 1. Next, we're going to write a condition as j is less than 5. Because 5 is the number of elements of the array. And then we're just going to save j plus plus. Once we do this, we know that we need to continue with the second step. Find the lowest value in all the elements after it. To do that, we're going to use our min variable. So before I write the code for that, we're going to have to make our min variable. So let's just say int min is equal to I. As we saw before, min is originally initialized to I. Inside our inner loop, we're just going to say if a of j is lesser than a of min, we're just going to set min to j. And this is really the same thing that we've seen before. If this was my minimum and we found a value lesser than that, well then this would be my new minimum. So now that we've found the index of the lowest value, we have to swap a of I with a of min. And to do this, we have to make a different variable known as temp. So let me just make that. Int temp is equal to 0. Once we do this, we're just going to have to swap the two values. And we know that there are only 3 steps here. So the first thing we're going to do is just copy the value in a of I to temp. So we're just going to say temp is equal to a of I. After this, we're going to copy the value in a of min to a of I. So we're just going to say a of I is equal to a of min. Next, we got to set a of min to temp. So we'll just say a of min is equal to temp. And these 3 lines of code can effectively swap the two values in a of I and a of min. And that's it. This simple program can sort any array in the ascending order. And I'm also going to add this bit of code that just prints all the values of the array after sorting. And now let's just run this program. So when I run this program, it asks me to enter a value. Let's just enter 5 random values. So I'll enter 2, 9, 8, 1 and 10. We know by observation that this should be sorted as 1, 2, 8, 9 and 10. And when I click enter, that is how it sorts it. It gives me 1, 2, 8, 9 and 10. So it works perfectly fine. Now I'll run this program one more time, but now I'll enter negative values. So let's enter -3, -7, -8, -9 and -15. This should be sorted as -15, -9, -8, -7 and -3. And when I click enter, it does give me that. It gives me -15, -9, -8, -7 and -3. But what if I want to sort something in a descending order, from the largest to the smallest? If you look at this program, all we're doing is finding the smallest value and moving it to the front of the array. And this will sort it in an ascending order. To sort my array in a descending order, I will have to find the largest value and move it to the front of the array, so that eventually my array is sorted in a descending order. You could try this out yourself. In this case, what we're doing is finding the index of the minimum value. We'll just do the opposite. We're just going to change this to a of j greater than a of min. And now min is actually going to hold the index of the largest element. If you manually iterate this, you'll find that this will sort the array in a descending order. Basically what it's saying is that if this was my current maximum, and if I find something greater than that, we're going to set this as our new maximum. And as we keep doing this, we will find the largest value. And as we keep moving this value to the front of the array, we will sort it in a descending order. Let's run this as well and see if it works. So let's just enter 5 values. 8, 7, 6, 4 and 5. We know that this should be sorted as 8, 7, 6, 5 and 4. And when I click enter, it does sort it in the correct order. So it works perfectly well. And that's it. That's all you need to know about the selection sort in Java. Thank you for watching.